Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're zeroing in on something really fundamental in construction, but maybe a bit behind the scenes. It's how general contractors buy out the job. We're focusing specifically on subcontracting.
That's right. And we've got a great source giving us the GC's perspective, which really helps understand why managing subcontractors effectively is just, well, absolutely critical for any project's success.
Yeah, our mission today is really to unpack all those complexities.
hmm
And it's more than just, hiring someone to install something. The source shows this huge range. Subcontractors might just install materials the GC bought, or they
Yeah.
could provide everything. Labor, gear, materials.
Some even do design build for really specialized systems. It's quite varied.
Okay, so let's dive in. What's the basic thinking for a general contractor when they decide to subcontract so much of the actual building work?
Well, fundamentally, the GC usually doesn't do most of the physical work themselves. They rely heavily on a network of specialized subcontractors.
Right.
And because they rely on them so much, GCs put a lot of time and energy into, hiring and managing these partners.
Oh, I bet. Because if something goes wrong with a sub,
Exactly. A bad choice or poor management. That can mean delays, poor quality work, all sorts of problems, real knock-on effects.
so the owner sets the overall scope, right, with the plans and specs. But then it's the GC who figures out how to get it done.
Precisely. And a big part of that strategy is deciding which pieces of the work make sense to subcontract out to specialists.
So the GC kind of carves up the whole project.
Yeah, they essentially break it down into these distinct work packages.
Yeah.
Plumbing, electrical, roofing, whatever it is. And for each package they plan to subcontract, they create a separate bid request. It's a really foundational step.
Like conducting an orchestra, making sure every instrument plays its part. They have to ensure everything in the owner's plan is covered by someone's scope.
Uh-huh. And just as importantly, avoid overlap.
Oh, yeah. Imagine the mess if two subs think they're doing the same thing. Or worse.
If something gets missed entirely. That's not just about avoiding paying twice. It's serious risk management. It prevents disputes and delays later on. That's key project leadership stuff.
Makes sense. So they define these packages, then comes this buying out the job part. What exactly does that mean?
Sure, buying out the job, or you might hear procurement in this context, it's basically the whole process of finding, choosing, and then locking in those subcontractors for each package.
And locking them in usually means purchase orders.
Purchase orders, yeah, or formal subcontract agreements. And our source points out something interesting, this whole buying out process. It looks a lot like how the GC bid for the main job in the first place.
Ah, so it's like running a bunch of mini bidding processes.
Exactly. Each one leading to a separate contract between the GC and that specific sub.
Okay, so how do they go about getting those bids and checking them out? What's the usual approach?
Well, often they'll start with subs they already know and trust. Their preferred partners.
The go-to guys.
Right. But to keep things competitive, they don't just rely on them. They'll send out invitations to bid ITBs or RFQs to several other potential bidders for each trade.
How many usually?
The aim is typically to get maybe 3 to 6 bids for each scope of work. Gives them options and a feel for the market price.
And when those bids come rolling in, it's not just about the bottom line number, is it?
Oh, definitely not. The GC has to really dig into each proposal.
What are they looking for?
Completeness, first off. Does the bid cover everything it's supposed to? Then they compare bids across different trades. Are there gaps or overlaps?
Like the example in the source. Who handles the vent stack boots on the roof? Is it the plumber or the roofer?
Exactly that kind of detail. Got to make sure every little piece is accounted for and assigned clearly. It avoids headaches later.
And the timing on this can be pretty tight, can't it? These sub-bids often land right before the GC has to submit their own main bid to the owner.
Yeah, it can be right down to the wire sometimes. The winning sub-bid prices become a crucial part of the GC's overall cost calculation for the project.
Okay, so bids are in, they've been reviewed. Now comes awarding the subcontracts. And you mentioned it's not just picking the lowest number. Negotiation is common.
Almost always.
Yeah.
Yeah, negotiation is key. It covers a lot more than just price.
Like what?
Well, the precise scope of work, for one, payment terms, warranty details, it's all on the table.
And the source highlights some specific things the GC is really focused on during these talks, right?
Definitely. Things like clarifying who does tasks that might fall between trades, like installing appliances, who brings them in, hooks them up.
Right, or who gets the permits for specific work.
Exactly. Also, nailing down the schedule expectations, how much notice they need before starting, the process for handling submittals.
And change orders, that's always a big one.
Huge. And what happens if the sub doesn't perform? Consequences need to be clear. Site cleanup responsibilities too.
And warranty work after the job's done.
Yep, how that gets handled. It's all about setting really clear expectations up front and having procedures in place. Protects everyone involved.
So the actual subcontract agreement, is it a complex document?
Usually less complex than the main owner GC contract. Our source says they're often shorter, sometimes combining the agreement and the general conditions.
Are there standard forms people use?
There are. You've got forms from the AIA, that's the American Institute of Architects. Their documents are widely used, and also consensus docs. But some GCs use their own custom agreements too.
But regardless of the form, they all specify the basics, who's involved, what the work is.
Right, and they always reference the main project documents, like the drawings, specs, and the prime contract itself.
You mentioned the prime contract. What about those flow-through clauses? What do they do?
Good question. Think of them as passing down certain rules from the main contract, the one between the owner and the GC, to the subcontractor.
So like payment schedules.
Payment schedules, warranty periods, things like that. If the owner and GC agreed on something specific, these clauses often make it apply to the sub too. It keeps everyone aligned.
So it really ties the sub into the main project rules.
Exactly. And it just reinforces that these subcontracts are serious legal documents, not just a handshake deal.
Does the owner have any say in who the GC hires as subs?
Often, yes.
Yep.
The owner frequently reserves the right to approve or reject the GC's choices.
Really? How does that work?
Well, the AIA general conditions, for example, have a process. The GC tells the owner and architect who they plan to use, and the owner gets a certain amount of time to object if they have a valid reason, maybe based on qualifications or past issues.
So another layer of checks and balances. Okay, let's shift gears slightly. The source mentioned something called bid shopping. What's that about?
Yeah, bid shopping or price shopping, it's seen as unethical. It's basically when a contractor gets bids from subs and then shares those prices with other subs to try and pressure them into lowering their price.
Playing them off against each other after the bids are in.
Right. It can happen before or after the GC gets the main job. And sometimes it's the GC doing it, sometimes maybe even another sub trying to undercut someone.
You can see why that's frowned upon. It sort of breaks the trust in the bidding process.
Absolutely. If subs think their confidential bids are just going to be used as leverage, they might stop bidding fairly or stop bidding altogether for that GC.
So it could really hurt the GC's reputation and ability to get good bids down the road?
Definitely. It can backfire long term. You might save a buck now, but lose access to good, reliable subs later.
Okay, so if just picking the lowest bid is risky and bid shopping is out, how do GCs make these choices? What are the main criteria?
Well, our source breaks it down into three big areas. Business competency, trade competency, and then, yes, the bid price is still a factor.
But not the only factor.
Exactly. Focusing only on the lowest number can be really short-sighted.
All right, let's take business competency first. What falls under that umbrella? What are they checking?
This is really about the sub as a stable professional business. So things like how long have they been around, stability matters.
Sure, track record.
Do they have enough working capital? Can they handle bumps in the road financially? What's their reputation for communication like? Are they responsive?
You need to be able to get hold of them easily.
For sure. Can they get the required bonds? Performance bonds, payment bonds? That's often critical.
Insurance too, I imagine.
Absolutely. Got to have adequate insurance. And crucially, what's their payment history like with their own suppliers and subs?
You don't want them causing liens problems on your project.
Exactly. And finally, just their overall professionalism. Their team is on your site representing you, so appearance and conduct matter too.
Okay, that makes sense. It's the whole package as a reliable business partner. Now, what about trade competency? This sounds more like their actual skills.
Right. This is about, can they actually do the work to the required quality, and can they do it on schedule?
So experience on similar jobs.
Yep. Do they have the right expertise? Are they reliable with schedules? Delays from one sub can mess up the whole project.
Do they have enough skilled workers?
Crucial. And are they committed to finishing their work before running off to another job?
That can be frustrating.
Very. Also, their general attitude. Are they cooperative? Construction is a team effort.
What else? Licensing?
Gotta have the proper licenses, of course. And importantly, how do they handle warranty claims after the job is done? Are they responsive? That reflects on the GC too.
Okay, so business, health, and trade skill. Now back to the bid price. We said lowest isn't always best.
Right. A bid that's way, way lower than others. That can be a major red flag.
Why is that? What could it mean?
It could mean they missed something important in the scope. Or maybe they plan to cut corners on materials or quality.
Or maybe they plan to make it up later.
That's the other danger. Some less scrupulous subs might bid low just to get the job, knowing they'll hit you with a ton of change orders later to inflate the price.
Sneaky. So the GC really needs to scrutinize those unusually low bids.
Definitely. Make sure everything's actually covered and the price makes sense. It's a balancing act. Competitive price, yes, but not at the expense of quality or inviting future problems.
And what about using those preferred subcontractors we mentioned earlier? Pros and cons there.
Yeah, there are. The upside. Strong relationships usually mean smoother work, better communication, maybe even better long-term value. You know what you're getting.
But the downside?
Well, if you only use your favorites, other good subs might start bothering to bid. You could end up paying more than market rate, or your preferred subs might get a bit complacent.
Interesting trade-offs. Okay, so after all this vetting and negotiation, why go through all the hassle? What are the big advantages for the GC in using subcontractors?
Oh, the advantages are significant. First big one, shifting risk and cost.
How so?
The sub takes on the risk of pricing their part of the job correctly. The labor, materials, equipment. They also usually carry the warranty for their specific work.
So the GC isn't directly on the hook for those details.
Right. And it means the GC doesn't have to keep a huge, expensive workforce of specialized tradespeople on their own payroll all the time. Lowers their overhead costs considerably.
Okay, risk transfer and lower overhead. What else?
Added quality and efficiency. That's number 2.
Because they're specialists.
Exactly. Specialty contractors have crews who do that one type of work all day, every day. They get really good and really efficient at it, often better and faster than if the GC tried to do it themselves.
Practice makes perfect.
Pretty much. That repetition builds serious expertise and productivity.
And the source mentions some wider industry benefits, too.
Yeah, it creates opportunities for smaller companies, right? Firms that maybe couldn't bond a whole massive project on their own can thrive by specializing.
So it helps create a more diverse and competitive market.
It does. And that competition can ultimately help keep overall construction costs down.
Okay, compelling reasons to subcontract. But of course, there have to be downsides, too. What are the main challenges GCs face because they rely on subs?
Oh, absolutely. Big challenge number 1, the administrative and oversight burden. It's significant. You're coordinating multiple separate companies, different bosses, different crews, different ways of working, getting everyone scheduled correctly, communicating clearly, making sure they don't physically get in each other's way on site.
Sounds like a constant juggling act.
It really is. And because trades depend on each other, the plumber can't work until the framing is up, etc., one sub's delay can cause a chain reaction.
What about damage on site? If something gets broken.
Figuring out who's responsible can be tricky and lead to disputes. And remember, at the end of the day, the GC is ultimately responsible for the quality of all the work, including the subs. So they need constant vigilance, constant quality control.
That sounds like a lot of potential headaches. Any financial challenges specific to subcontracting?
Yes, definitely. Cash flow can be a big one. Sometimes the owner is slow paying the GC. But the GC often still has to pay their subcontractors on time according to their agreements.
So the GC is stuck in the middle.
Exactly. The source even gives an example of a GC having to take out a loan just to pay a sub because the owner's payment was late. That shows the kind of cash flow pressure they can be under.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. And the last disadvantage mentioned was about quality assurance.
Right. Sometimes it's hard to really know how qualified a sub is, especially in trades where maybe licensing isn't super strict.
Lower barrier to entry means more risk.
It can, yeah. You might end up hiring someone less experienced or knowledgeable than you'd like. And this risk gets amplified if the GC is working in a new city or region where they don't know the local subs as well.
Makes sense. Okay, one more related area. Procuring materials. How does that fit in with subcontracting?
Generally, the rule is GCs buy materials for work they do themselves. Subcontractors buy the materials for their scope of work.
Seems straightforward.
Mostly, yes. But a big thing to manage is long lead items.
Stuff that takes ages to get.
Exactly. Custom steel, big pieces of mechanical equipment, elevators, that kind of thing. You have to order those way early to avoid delaying the whole project.
And just getting materials to the site can be a challenge.
Oh, yeah. Think about site congestion trucks coming and going from dozens of suppliers. Where do you store everything? Storage space is often limited and costs money.
And payment again. The GC might have to pay the supplier before the owner kills them.
Often the case. Another cash flow pressure point.
So choosing suppliers. Similar process to choosing subs, looking for reliability and cost.
Pretty much. You want suppliers who deliver on time and offer competitive pricing. The GC tries to lock in those prices using formal purchase orders or POs.
What goes into a PO?
All the key details: quantities, the agreed price, taxes, shipping costs, any discounts, submittal requirements like samples or shop drawings, and of course the delivery schedule.
And someone has to check the deliveries when they arrive.
Yep, that usually falls to the project superintendent. They verify it's the right stuff, correct quantity, no damage.
But the main takeaway is each contractor generally orders their own stuff.
That's the standard approach, yes.
Yeah.
GC for their work, subs for theirs. And this whole procurement thing, it's not a one-off task. It's ongoing throughout the entire construction phase.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful, really peeling back the layers on subcontracting for GCs. It's amazing how complex and absolutely vital this whole process is.
It really is. You see GCs constantly doing this balancing act, right?
Yeah.
Trying to leverage the sub's expertise and shift some risk, but at the same time managing all the admin, the finances, the quality control.
Yeah.
It's a huge undertaking.
Definitely. So thinking about this whole intricate system, all these relationships, responsibilities, here's something for you, our listener, to chew on. When a project relies so heavily on subcontractors, what do you think is the absolute single most crucial factor for a general contractor to manage effectively to guarantee success? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.